right, guys, we're back again with another great episode of PFREI. I'm your host, Fuquan Bilal. Today I had the man, the myth, the legend, Tim Bratz, the multifamily king. No, I'm just kidding. No, welcome to the show, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know your focus is commercial real estate, so we'll get into that in apartment buildings. We were just talking. Your portfolio is somewhere. It's crazy, 280 million. So you definitely guys want to listen in on
It's
this.
north of that now, man. I'm at about 335 million now.
Ooh, wow, that's beautiful. I mean, I can only imagine the pressure to constantly perform and produce for your investors as you're growing. So this is great. I wanted to get you on the show because I had a couple of people who do multifamily, and the show basically just talks about the different, real estate is multifaceted. So we talk about wholesaling, which has been I don't know, I've probably interviewed 100 wholesalers, right? Interviewed maybe one or two multifamily guys. I know that, your name is like on the top of the list on my radar that I wanted to get on the show. So you could kind of share with our audience pretty much what is it that you do and how do you help investors achieve their financial goals. And we'll talk about some other stuff from there. The first question I always ask him is, why are you passionate for real estate investing?
Yeah, man. So first of all, thank you for having me, dude. I got a ton of respect for you and all the things that you've done in real estate and all the value that you provide to other people. So, dude, it's a big honor to be here and really appreciate the invite, man. So as far as real estate goes, I got involved in real estate when the market was going crazy back in 03 to 07. That's when I really was going through college and really understood that people made a lot of money in real estate. So that was the initial motivating factor. And so I've always been in real estate ever since I got out of college. I don't know anything else. And what I love about it is it's not an experiment, right? It's not a startup. It's not a get rich quick. It's I don't know, since the beginning of civilization, land ownership has been the best measure of wealth, And so I knew that eventually it would work out. It would just be a matter of time for me of, how long does it take in order for me to go and, go through the hurdles and go through the struggles and overcome all those obstacles. And eventually I get to a point where real estate worked, right? It's not whether or not it works. It's just, what's the timeline? And so for me, that was a big push. I knew that it made sense. I knew it was the greatest way to create wealth and the greatest way to preserve wealth. It was just a matter of time for me to go out and get that. And so what I've learned since then and what I'm really passionate about is dude, it's not rocket science, right? It's buying assets, creating enough value for other people where they're willing to pay you for that asset. And not only they pay you, right? So you create value, nice, clean, safe, functional place for somebody to live. They're willing to pay you every month to live there. That covers all of your operating expenses to own that asset. It pays for your loan on that asset. It puts cash in your pocket every single month. And then when you think about how is wealth built, dude, every year you nominally bump up the rent or you improve the value. It appreciates a little bit over time. And then every year, every month, you're making a mortgage payment, or really your tenants are making a mortgage payment. You're slamming down principal on your loan amount. And all of a sudden it's appreciating, you're paying down. And all of a sudden over here, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, you've created all this equity for just not doing anything Herculean, right? It's a standard process. You buy assets, you get other people to pay for them, and you sit on it over time, and eventually you don't owe anything on it, and the value doubles, and all of a sudden you're worth millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. And so for me, it's so simple yet so profound.
You make it sound so sexy. So easy. When do I start? Let me start right now. So yeah, we both know there's challenges that come along with this, man. So let's talk about that. You got beat up on your way. Let's talk about some of those hurdles that you had to overcome, who made you the man you are today, the businessman you are today. I've heard your story before where you had a bad partnership and you was doing most of the work and you noticed the writing on the wall and you kind of went off and did your own thing, which probably was the best thing ever. But you can't do this without a team. And I know you built a great team, but let's talk about some of the struggles along the way. Who got you where you are now?
Yeah. I think, I mean, dude, tons of struggles, right? I was really bad at real estate for the first 7 years, and I got good at it about 5 years ago. And even 5 years ago, I was still kind of figuring it out. And I think early on, there's going to be struggles. You understand there's going to be struggles. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter what business you begin. It doesn't matter even if you're in a job or whatever you're going through. There's going to be struggles in whatever it is. They say you don't become an expert in anything unless you give 10,000 hours of work. Which, if you're given 40 hours a week, that's a 5-year time frame. So, a full-time effort for 5 years makes you an expert in whatever industry you're in. And so, for me, I'm going through the process early on. I messed up everything. And I think if you would have told me all the struggles and adversities that I would have faced throughout this path, I don't know if I would have pursued it, but I think people always think the grass is greener on the other side. Oh, let me go and, chase cryptocurrency right now. Let me chase e-commerce stores.
That's crazy, right?
Like all this stuff, man. Let me go and short the stock market or short, blockbuster stock, whatever the hell that people are doing, right, in order to get rich quick. And to me, like, the grass is not always greener. It's just different, right? And it takes a shitload of watering in order to get the grass up and running on the other side of the fence, right? And so for me, again, going back to the idea of real estate is it's been around, it's time tested, it's super steady. Like, I knew that it would work. So I always focused on the goal, right? I think a lot of people, they're like, what if a contractor rips me off? That's happened many a times. I've walked into houses and opened up the door with roaches falling on my head from the door jamb. I've walked out with fleas up my jeans, left my jeans in the middle of the driveway, drove home pantsless, right? I've had tenants chase me out of houses with baseball bats. I've had tenants tear up my property like you've never seen. I've had contractors rip me off out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've had pipes ripped out of properties 3 times while I was renovating it, like over and over, appliances, all this stuff, dude, ripped off on so many different levels. And I think if you focus on that, then all of a sudden you think about all the negative stuff that could come with. Dude, I just focused on the positive side. I always just focused on, dude, there's going to be some struggles. There's going to be some bullshit. There's going to be some garbage that I have to deal with. But guess what? I'm going to be financially free, because a lot of people are going to get cleaned out from this stuff happening. They're going to get their legs wiped out. They're going to not be tough enough internally to stick with it. And I was like, dude, I know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I know that eventually, if I keep on getting this going, or keep on moving this along, then I'm going to be able to build out a team, and I'll be able to hire a management company. I'll be able to hire people to go and deal with this stuff that I don't want to do, but I can go and if I just stick with it. And so I think that's, I don't know, probably one of the biggest laws of success and secrets of success. Dude, you just stick with it, right? Like, I remember the one Rocky movie. He's like, it's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and then keep moving forward. Right? That's how winning is done.
Absolutely.
And dude, it's 100% the fact. So many people get hit and they get knocked out of the ring and they're like, I'm not going to throw my gloves in. I'm not doing this anymore. Dude, I had to create a constraint where I didn't have an option, right? Like, I came straight out of college into real estate, and then the market collapsed in 2008. What else was I going to do, though? I didn't know anything else. Like, go get a job, and like, real estate's the only thing I knew. So I had already like almost burnt the ships in a way that I didn't have other plan Bs. I didn't have other options. I had to make it work, otherwise I'd die, right? And so I just did. I just dealt with the garbage. I just pushed through all the adversities and moved the needle forward, man.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's the journey along the way has definitely shaped and molded you into a better operator. And I saw the debate, residential versus multifamily. It was a great debate. That was really good, and a lot of good pointers on both sides. But after I started the debate, I'm like, I'll start look, because I'm one of those single family flip guys. Multifamily for us here in New Jersey is 4 family, 6 family. That's pretty much residential 1 through 4 my space. Because of taxes in New Jersey where I'm at, the price is so cheap. So I started looking at stuff out of state where pretty much everybody who's in multifamily don't invest in their backyard. They invest in either states that's Ohio, Pennsylvania, wherever that's at, where you can find cheaper product with taxes and everything else, and B class or whatever they, buy box is. What made you make that transition? Because you started off doing some single family stuff, and you sort of writing on the wall earlier and said, you know what, I need to jump into this multifamily thing.
Yeah, man. I'm a residential guy. Like I got my real estate license because I thought that's how you got started, and I got into wholesaling, and then I started flipping, kind of like the HGTV retail flips. And then I ended up buying some single family rentals, some small multi, like the duplexes and quadplexes and triplexes, and then I fell into an 8-unit building in 2012. It was just so cheap I couldn't pass it up. So I bought this 8-unit building, and I gravitated heavily towards like the turnkey rental side of things. First of all, I'm a crappy flipper. I'm not very good at it. I don't like the emotional side of dealing with, somebody who doesn't like the backsplash that we picked out for the house. Like that just drives me nuts. It's very, when there's not something that's predictable, and like I like the investment side of real estate because it's very numbers, analytics. It's not emotional. Does it work? Does it not work? No problem. Like it's the retail side ends up becoming very emotional. You get people who just don't think reasonably and don't think logically, and that makes it very difficult to have a predictable business. So for me, I gravitated towards the rental side very quickly. The other thing is, like, if I had a rental, I could buy it, fix it all up, put a tenant in place, and then flip it as a turnkey rental to a white collar professional, and that's great. I'd make the same percentage return of what I was into it for as I did on my like HGTV retail flips. The difference was, if this rental didn't sell, I didn't care because I had enough cash flow that covered the operating expenses and the debt service and the holding costs on that property, versus the retail flip just sat vacant. And it sucked money every single month, and I got really stressed about that. So that was the main reason why I gravitated towards rentals. And then the apartments just offers more scale, and so it was the same thing. It was just on a bigger scale, and instead of going and negotiating on 10 single family houses, I can go and negotiate on one 10-unit apartment building. I go get financing on one building instead of 10 houses. I go and look at one foundation instead of 10 foundations, one roof instead of 10 roofs. Go to collect rent at one location instead of 10 locations. So there's efficiencies and economies of scale that came into that. I have one water bill instead of 10 water bills. So just like paying utilities became easier. Everything on multiple levels became easier because you had the scale associated with it.
Yeah.
Management fees are less because everything's in one spot. So because of that, I gravitated towards that, and I built up a portfolio of all these small apartment buildings, 8 units, and then I bought a 14, and then I bought a 23, and I naturally and organically kind of grew into larger and larger buildings. And when my portfolio was over 100 units, then that allowed me to go and negotiate on a 100-unit apartment building, and I doubled my portfolio overnight. And then I had 200 units, and I went and bought another 60 unit and 134 unit, and now I had 400 units. Essentially within 30 days after that. So like the growth that you can experience is like exponential.
Yeah, let's talk two more questions I have for you. One is distress. So everybody who get into the multifamily sector, they're either looking for class B, class C, and everybody stay away from distress. So what gives me my importance of what gives my feeling of importance, Tim, is I come from North New Jersey. I'm not sure how familiar you are with New Jersey. It's the hood, right? When I go back to that community and develop those properties that are burnt out or whatever, like totally distressed, and bring them back, and then give a tenant in that neighborhood an opportunity that they would have to live in the same quality of apartment if it was in a B class or A class, that gives me a feeling of importance, knowing that I went back with the property and the tax roll and made the community better, because all the other investors are scared to invest in the area, one, because of the people that's there. So, they kind of think, okay, everybody there is bad, but that's not true. There are some good people that live in bad neighborhoods. So that gives my feeling of importance. But getting over to my question is, why do you think people stay away from those distressed assets? Because there's so many multifamily distressed assets, but people just stay away from them. I think when I look at that, I'm saying opportunity. If you go to Cleveland, East Cleveland, or certain parts of the town, you're like, why is this vacant? This is a 100-unit building, cheap.
Yep.
What's your take on that? I just wanted your opinion on that.
Yeah. So what you'll find is, like the niche that I fell into was, I was bigger than the small investors, but I was smaller than the hedge funds and the REITs. And so I was kind of like in this middle ground of I wanted to go and buy the same stuff actually that the real estate hedge funds and the real estate trusts were buying, but they had deeper pockets than I had. And so I had to go into and buy a lot of distressed assets and create the appreciation. The small guys cannot usually qualify. Like, dude, it's a big renovation. You know, you go into East Cleveland, you're talking about doing all, like, it's a nice, they have nice buildings, but first of all, like, the school system's tough, right? There's a lot of crime in the area. Stuff gets broken into all the time. You have to worry about if it's a vacant building, it's going to get broken into, all the supplies are going to get stolen. Like, so like there's that issue. But you can go into something in that area specifically. It's a very older housing stock too. The buildings are 100 years old, so you find out like there's foundation issues and there's plumbing issues and there's just a lot of electrical type stuff and that kind of jazz. So it ends up becoming too much work for a lot of the smaller investors to want to get into that, and it's too distressed for the hedge funds and the REITs who have FU kind of money. They'll just go and buy something that's stabilized because they can sit on it for the next 10, 15, 20 years. They don't have to pay anybody back. It's a, you know, a pool of money that they have other deals going on at all times, and they can pay back their investors from those. So I found that exactly what you're talking about has huge upside. It's just, are you willing to, you know, roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty? And we were willing to do that. That's why I was able to grow a portfolio of over 4,000 doors in 5 years and create, like, in the heat of a market cycle, right? Like 15 to 2020 was like, dude, apartments were all over the place. Everybody's like, I want apartment buildings. And the prices skyrocketed. But because I went in, bought distressed assets, and I forced appreciation, I created it through the value add and through the renovations, instead of speculating on it and waiting for it to appreciate just kind of over time. Like my portfolio is worth, you know, it's worth around $335 million. We only owe 220 million, 215 million on it. So like, we were able to build a portfolio and create $100 million of equity. It's not all mine, right? Like, I get a chunk of it, but I have partners and equity investors and stuff like that. But like, create $100 million of equity in the peak of the market because we were willing to get into some of those opportunistic areas.
Yeah.
You know, and I think every area has both opportunity and struggle, right? Like, in the areas you're talking about, the struggle is it's a tough area, but there's huge upside on it. Like, the opportunity in an A-class kind of area that's nice and white collar kind of an areas, you don't have to deal with the headaches. You don't have to get your hands dirty. But the struggle is you can't find deals, right? They're hard to find deals on that kind of stuff. So I think there's a give and take and kind of a on all of that stuff. Just depends on what works for you. And I think at different times in your career and different seasons in your investing career, like, I'm not willing to buy the same stuff that I was willing to buy 5 years ago, right? Like, now I want bigger buildings. I want a little bit nicer of an area. Those buildings that I did buy, I told you before we started this, I'm selling 2,000 doors. Those are all my small buildings under 100 units and anything that's like C-class areas. So I'm selling off that. They serve their purpose, got me to where I am today, but not where I want to go, right? I can't scale to 10,000 doors with a bunch of C-class, heavy management intensive type properties. I need to get into more of a B-class, less management, less headache, and something that's a little bit more stabilized instead of you know, taking on all this work. And that ends up becoming the bottleneck a lot of times.
Makes sense. Last question I have for you is COVID, the elephant in the room. You know, you own this massive portfolio, all these doors. You know, I've been on calls with a lot of operators who had, you know, stopped paying investors, building reserves. That was like the trend during the whole thing. How did you come out of that, and where do you stand now as far as your portfolio? Some people got beat up. Some people, I didn't had still 95% rental collection, you know, whatever. Yeah. How did that affect you? And then, you know, how did you pivot from that? Because I know you didn't sit still to take it.
No, man. I mean, I think, like, people are like, let's just kind of keep it hush hush. Like tenants aren't going to find out that there's an eviction moratorium. Like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, you don't think, especially in an apartment building. So I went to my team and I was like, we got to hit this in the face before it hits us in the face. So we put together some communication to the tenants that was very, very candid, right? It was just, hey guys, here's what's going on. You know, there's an eviction moratorium. We can't evict anybody for not paying rent. That doesn't mean you don't have to pay rent, right? Like, if you don't pay rent, here's what happens. We can't pay for the trash to get picked up, and you're gonna have garbage all over your home. You can't pay for an exterminator to come out. We can't pay for the grass to get cut. Can't pay for the lights and the heat to work in the wintertime. I can't pay. Like, like this, you think that all this money that you pay in rent goes to, some landlord sitting up on a hill in a castle somewhere. That's not the case. It goes to the operating expenses and the mortgage payment on the property. And so I think explaining that to the tenants, that's not just lining our pockets with cash, is an important factor. Then the other thing is, hey, if there's anybody who is having an issue, let us know. We'll work with you. We'll put you on a payment plan. And by the way, here's 5 or 6 different like subsidy organizations or churches or whatever that we're helping people with food, with money, with rent cash, like anything that they needed. And so we made sure that they had access to all these different resources. So we kind of attacked it before we got hit by it. I will say that our B class stuff and better is performing well, right? None of those people were adversely affected by their jobs. We are collecting 97% in our B class stuff. In the C class stuff, that's there's a little bit of gaming of the system. And it wasn't bad at first. There was a rental or an eviction moratorium last summer, and then it lifted in like August, I think. And so a lot of people caught up on payments and we were good to go there. A few people had turned over, but then they put it back in place over the holidays. And now, I don't know if you saw it today, but Biden just extended it until June. So now there's an eviction moratorium until June.
Crazy, yeah.
Which is not exciting, right? As a landlord. But if you have really good management in place, that helps. If you have solid areas and you have solid tenants and they're not adversely affected by the jobs and the work that COVID has affected, you're in pretty good shape. We do have some C-class stuff. And even though not all of our tenants are adversely affected from an income, they're still kind of gaming the system. And it wasn't a big deal. It's like 1% a month and then another 1%. But then all of a sudden over 5-6 months, that adds up. And all of a sudden your collections drop below 90%. And then you're like, and you start worrying a little bit about this stuff. So, fortunately, we're in a position where we bought at a very low basis, right? And a lot of our properties have been refinanced where we paid back our investors. And then there's other properties that might not have been paid back, but again, because we're at such a low basis, we don't really need that high of an occupancy. We renovate it, and I think 99% of your issues, of all landlord issues, whether COVID's happening or not, are mostly eliminated if you do 2 things. You screen your tenants, make sure you have quality tenants in place. Most of the tenants that are gaming the system, we didn't put in place. They were put in there by the previous owner, and we just couldn't kick them out because COVID happened immediately after we bought the property. So if you screen your tenants, that's going to help. And you take care of the property and you show them that you're actually offering value and doing the right thing and trying to give them someplace that's clean and safe and functional and cosmetically improved and updated. That's going to eliminate 99% of your issues. There's going to be some gaming of the system for sure, but I think just doing those 2 things is going to be a big deal for you, and overly communicating all this stuff.
Yeah, this is great, man. Thank you, man. I know you got a lot on your plate. I really appreciate you taking the time out today to come on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Tim Bratz, another great episode. PFREI, Passion for Real Estate Investments. Catch us on YouTube, Twitter, all the other social media handles. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. All the knowledge you shared with us today.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you for having me.